Vortex Nation, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time you're watching or listening to this. We have in the house myself, Jimmy, and Mark, as usual. Probably don't even need to say that every single time, but I do usually. Reuben, sitting across the table from me, and also a Vortex contractor, another man of mystery,
yes,
Justin, who is a new guest to the podcast. But not new around this building. We've known Justin for a bit yet, and Justin brings with him a whole unique set of experiences from a professional sense, and also now been working with us on a number of different things in regards to shooting and utilizing some pretty high-end long-range rifle scopes, rifles, different tools, and stuff like that. So when we had an episode a while back about reticles, and I think it was called Reticles 101 or something like that, where we kind of went through the whole gambit of your standard duplex reticle to BDCs to then some more complex reticles, we figured we would take a deeper dive into some of these more really complex is just the word that's coming to mind, but I don't want to intricate technical reticles.
Busy?
Potentially busy, yes, to some people. They'll certainly look at them and say that. Stuff that you can see in like our Razor Gen 2 long-range rifle scopes or the AMG rifle scope, PST maybe in there as well. So we're talking about EBR-7Cs, and now also, when we did our last podcast, we didn't have the Horus options too, so we're going to chat a little bit about those guys. Reticles that look cool. I think in many cases people get them because they look cool. I would be lying if I said I didn't think that myself. But yeah, anyway, so we're going to just dive in on these. I've probably already talked too much. Justin, how about you introduce yourself, though, for now, and then we'll go from there.
Well, again, like you guys know, Justin just moved back to the area, kind of how I got linked up with you guys through the military, actually. Actually, I just got out this year. First of the year, and I was stationed out in Colorado. So I have quite a bit of experience, both kind of on the instructional side and the employment side of the reticles, in particular the H59 and also the Tremor3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, so coming from doing that, like you said, teaching people and instructing people the proper uses of these technical reticles like this, what's your experience been? I'm sure you've gained a whole appreciation for how they work and all the little intricacies for them. But if somebody who's just getting into, just coming into using scopes like this and reticles like this with a whole lot of features around them like this, what's the barriers to that? What are some misconceptions that people oftentimes come in having? And then how do you kind of get over some of that?
A lot of the things I get, like feedback-wise, is they're busy. They get lost in the reticle, but they're actually very simple to use once you get the hang of them.
Okay. So how can something, I got to be honest, to hear somebody say they're simple to use, how can something that looks, for those of you, again, listening now, when we talk about stuff like the EBR-7C or these Horus Radicals, that's where you get these coined terms like the old Christmas tree, right? We're talking about, they got a lot of dots, they got dashes, they got stuff on the crosshairs in the stadia, they got stuff floating in the lower quadrants. How could something like that actually be simple to use?
Well, it's just like with anything else. Everything in the reticle means something. And for somebody, for example, who's new to cooking, you may look at a recipe and think that's confusing. So it's kind of all I don't know how you kind of perceive it. So anything's going to be, complicated to somebody that they don't know. Mm-hmm. So as long as you kind of understand it, you're not exposed to it before, you're used to the traditional like crosshairs. I mean, this is just at its very base, that's all it is.
Yeah.
So you just kind of have to expound on that.
Yeah.
I think like coming from a background of shooting, but like getting into long range when I came to Vortex, there was a lot of things that seemed like overly complex. And I think Paul Neese broke it down to me one time and kind of said, like, if you look at a reticle, there's a lot of things that repeat themselves within a reticle. Like there might be 3 or 4 horizontal stadia marks, on each horizontal stadia, but like they're each 2 MOA or they're each 1 mil or whatever. And it's like, okay, you look at those and then, yeah, that's, 8 features in a reticle, but they're all a part of one functionality. It'd be holding for wind. Then you look at the vertical stadia, right? It's like if there's 100 features in a reticle, there's probably like only like 4 real functions. There's just a bunch of different values that correspond back to that kind of that function, right?
Right, like at first glance, a person might be, holy mackerel, there's a lot of lines there. And you're like, well, yeah, there's a lot of lines, but they're actually all doing the same thing in essence.
Really yeah.
Mm-hmm. My buddy Eric called me one time. He's like, hey, Mark, I'm looking for a scope. And he goes, I don't need one of them damn Star Wars reticles either.
That's funny because that's the one I actually want.
Yeah. Where do you like? It is really interesting. Like you said, you kind of got down when you boil it down to the, or you at least try to make these reticles simple, which it sounds like they can be. But when you boil it down, yeah, if you put something on a reticle anywhere, if you put anything in your field of view, as long as it can stay there consistently, it's going to match up with something, right?
Yeah.
So as long as you can figure out what that lines up with, you don't exactly have to know like every single measurement and all this stuff. I mean, that's how they did things back in the day with dope, and a guy would say, yeah, when something looks like this in my scope, maybe covers up this much of my reticle,
yeah.
I know that it's about this size, then I'm assuming it's at about this distance. And when, it does that, I know that there's kind of like this one hash mark down here on my rifle scope that matches up with essentially where the bullet's going to drop. I mean, you just start doing this kind of estimation work.
I think we've all talked to Dave, local customer that's, does a lot of long range, like ELR shooting, right?
Right.
Got kind of a little gunsmithing shop built where he does a lot of work on his own guns and stuff. And Dave was telling me one time they were out at the range and doing this ELR shoot out in like Washington State or something. Probably one of the only reasons why anyone would visit Washington State.
Yeah, really.
Because
otherwise
it's
it's just raining.
But anyways, so they're out shooting, and they're shooting like 2 miles, right? And everybody gets lined up, and at the end of the day, they're all looking. This one guy that was actually having quite a bit of success, they go and everybody's looking at each other's rifles, kind of like, oh, what you shooting there? What you got there? And somebody gets down behind this other guy. We'll call him Greg. They're like, Greg, what kind of rifle are you shooting? And it's like very simple. Like didn't have a huge MOA base, built in. And they're like, well, how are you hitting the 2 mile target? Like, that's insane. And he's like, well, I used my reticle. I backed it out to this magnification. It was like a second focal plane reticle. So he had to calculate the value, measured up to a rock on the mountain with his reticle, and then zoomed in and aimed at the rock as his aiming point. And this is a mountain in the background of the target, right? So he actually gridded out the mountain in MOA, and then just aimed at that because that was a consistent aiming point.
Yeah.
So yeah, going exactly with what you said, you just need consistency.
Exactly. It's funny that you mentioned that because when we had Jeff Heeg in here earlier, we talked about on Long Range 1004, we talked about ELR shooting. And he had actually mentioned, this was one of those kind of like post-podcast talks. We're chatting, like, we just like, everybody hangs up and it's kind of like, oh yeah, and then this, and it's like, God, dang it.
Why did you say that?
Yeah.
Right.
But it was pretty cool. He was actually saying that in some ways, second focal plane can be somewhat advantageous to you because as you zoom out, you're essentially like, let's say you're on 12x and you zoom down to 4x. You've quadrupled the amount that each one of those hash marks corresponds to, so you can almost like cheat a ton of elevation into your
reticle.
And
the only thing that hurts you then is the magnification that you're lacking.
Right, yeah, exactly.
But yeah, absolutely. No, he's spot on.
Anyway, but where do you start with somebody? Let's say somebody's coming in totally fresh, and they're like, maybe at least let's say they've been shooting before, but they've been shooting, your typical hunting BDCs, maybe your duplexes, maybe some like very simple hash mark reticles. Like we have one called the VMR1. It's just like a simple hash mark reticle. Where do you start?
Or heck, even MilDot.
Or MilDot, yeah. Where do you start with somebody? Kind of like, do you just kind of throw them to the wolves right away? Like, this is how this works, this is how this works, or do you like kind of, how does that work?
Try to break it down a little bit. We're not going to throw them inside the scope because looking through a scope itself, you're just going to get lost in there.
Oh, really?
Like transparencies, kind of like overlays, just like handouts. Just print out what the actual reticle looks like. Talk through them. Like, hey, just literally point at each little thing. Walk them through it step by step.
Yeah.
But, for example, came in earlier this year and went over the Tremor3 and H59 with some people here. And having an overlay with, like, targets and things like that, actually manipulating that transparency on another like target.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, it's
It was
really
like one of those old
yeah.
projector overhead
Yeah,
things that you put over a piece of paper. Yeah.
absolutely. Just something like that to kind of walk them through it. Trying to explain everything and have them look through a scope and while you're trying to do that and have them actually trying to do that versus having an overlay, it's a little bit more difficult.
Right.
I bet.
So,
Especially
Well-
if you're outside and you start, then there's like grass in the way and you might be not seeing every single little dot or something,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, if you got, if you got multiple people, number one, everybody can look at that at the same time, and you're seeing exactly what they're seeing. I mean, you're
exactly.
moving that transparency over the top. Yeah,
otherwise,
that
you're going to
makes
be looking,
perfect
is it the
sense.
second slash from the left? And then you kind of get lost in there because you can't see what they do.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but kind of use a whole crawl, walk, run method.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So I want to get into talking about some of these. Like, so you mentioned the Horus Radicals. Those are two reticle options, the Tremor3 and the H59
Yeah.
that we offer now in the Gen 2 4.5 to 27. And then there's also then the EBR 7C that's kind of like the Vortex's. It's not, I wouldn't say it has quite as many. If you look at it visually, it doesn't have quite as many things going on, but it's also still fairly technical.
no, which is nice.
So what's kind of like, I know that the Horus ones have a very almost specific use, don't they? Whereas like a EBR 7C is kind of it can be tailored to a number of different things, or is that how the Horus works? Because like I remember when Reuben was explaining those to me, the Tremor3 and the H59, they're almost like a
kinda like
milling reticle meets a BDC, and they like had a kid or something, like a reticle kid.
There's a lot going on in there, a lot of different features, but it all depends, I guess, what you're going to be using it for, like end state. For example, the EBR7 might be a lot better choice for, maybe some competition shootings, even more precise engagements than, say, like the, Tremor3. The center dot in the EBR7s, I think, is 0.03 diameter versus, say, maybe the H59, which is a 0.05. I think.
Okay.
So it's a little bit more refining aiming point, but then all those other features you add in there as well that you may not necessarily need in the EBR7.
Yeah.
There's, moving, rapid engagement techniques in there, and wind dots, whatever you want to call them.
Right.
But time of flight, however you want to use that reticle versus, I don't know, like an EBR7 or EBR2 even.
Yeah.
So
I think a lot of times too, people look at a different reticle, and they, it's kind of like, Jimmy, I'm gonna steal your car reference here. I'm gonna do
Go
the
for
first
it. I'll
car
have to just
reference
come
of
up
the
with another
episode.
one later.
Yeah, you'll probably have a problem with it though. Anyways, the
as long as you don't say anything about a Chevy in a positive light, I'm fine.
I'm just saying you're right. I wouldn't want to do that.
I've just alienated 50% of our
Yeah,
listeners.
there you go. It's like, you go to a car lot and you're like, you don't just drive up to the car lot and be like, well, look at this, I got 500 options, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you go to the car lot looking for a truck, no, you're looking at trucks. And now, what within trucks do I need?
Mm-hmm.
You don't drive up and like there's like 500 cars on the lot plus whatever they can make you with all the options if you custom order it. No, like if you go looking for a minivan, you're not also looking at trucks at the same time and being like, well, should we get that one? No, it's like it's not a minivan, which you wouldn't get if you don't have kids. People do willingly choose to buy minivans, and they're pretty nice. But
When you're looking,
Gosh, you've
when you're
gone
looking
soft.
for a minivan, you're wishing that you were
I can do
looking at the
burnouts
trucks.
with a minivan. Yeah, you do. But when you're looking at all these different reticles, hey, you can lay some rubber with that thing.
You're
okay,
losing me. I know they're fast. I hate everything about minivans.
Practical and
one of the
tactical.
things that I hate about minivans is the fact that they're kind of hard to hate.
Yeah, right. I think the one redeeming factor is you can get a lot of guns in the back of one.
True. What were we talking
And
about?
in a very unassuming way.
Yeah, absolutely. Put
Yeah.
the little stickers on the back. The stick people stickers.
It wasn't a minivan, but I mean, look at the A-Team. They were
Yeah.
doing some work.
When you look at reticles,
That's right. Okay.
you're looking at like a purpose built thing that is going to do what you need it to do. Perfect example if you take like an SR25, AR10, whatever you want, and you're looking at all these different reticles out there, and it's like, okay, well, I have this gun, and then you look at a platform, like a platform like that, and then what available optics and reticles there are out there. Now that choice for H59, Tremor3, or EBR7C is a lot more refined. And you look at what you can do, especially with like a reticle that was designed around a platform like that or a cartridge like that, for the for that rapid engagement technique with the reticle, or for like all of our floating features on the 7C. Well, now that starts to make a lot more sense. So really, when people look at all these options and get overwhelmed, they're looking at a sample of way too many. They need to be looking at something more specific and purpose-built.
I see.
Because a lot of those features actually have limiting capabilities. So like he was talking about, the rapid engagement technique or the movers, that if someone wants to use those features at extended range, it doesn't apply. At certain ranges, it's just going to fall off. For example, I think the mover leads is only good to roughly around 400-ish. And I believe the, rapid engagement technique is only good for around 600-ish.
This is in the Horus Radicals particularly.
Yes, particularly for those. So again, if someone's like, well, I want to buy that, or I want to use that, and then, I can use this now, this mover, or whatever, at extended ranges, then it's just going to kind of fall off at that point.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really apply at all then.
Within 600 yards, this is the part where I feel like we got to just dive in at some point, right? Within like 600 yards, 400 yards, or whatever, like those things are they're pretty incredible, I got to admit, like as far as how they work and how they've been laid out and everything. And like you look at that thing and one immediate look at it, if you're not intimately familiar with it.
And you're speaking to the Horus Radicals, right, Jim?
Yes,
Yep.
yes. So like H59, Tremor3, I know there's more options. These are the ones that I've become at least remotely familiar with. One quick glance and you'd be like, well, no way. I would never get that. And then as some people start explaining, so there's like these little dashes above the horizontal stadia. So these are in the top 2 quadrants. And those correspond to, like, there's a certain target size, and if you can bracket the certain target size and those things, you get an immediate, essentially, holdover for it.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of, like, bring your holdover over, and then, like, holdover over, roger.
Well,
and then, take that shot, and then you, at the same time, have these wind dots going out from that point, or time of flight dots or whatever,
But in my experience, that application's very limited.
Is it? Okay.
But yes, like what you were saying, it's just to get rounds on target as fast as possible.
So
it's not going to be like
idea.
point of aim, point of impact type of thing. It's just going to be in the general vicinity of. So
it's based on a certain size and type of target.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
something that's a little bit maybe more flexible than steel.
Yeah.
It's a fighting reticle.
Yeah.
That's exactly kind of what it's designed
right?
out for. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of things, too, is like people say, well, that never applies to me because I'm never going to do this or I'm never going to deploy. But, I mean, when we're shooting steel targets, a lot of times we're shooting silhouette targets. We're shooting, 12-inch round targets, whatever they might be. A lot of times we're shooting, whatever you would call like an inanimate or like just a shape target. But, there are a lot of our customers need to be able to use a certain type of product in a certain type of application that may be real world if they were ever called upon to do that.
Yeah. The mover holdovers on those reticles goes out to like 60 miles an hour, right? Have you ever gotten to do that in like a regular civilian role?
I mean, not in a civilian role. I've never gotten to use it in any
Am I right on that? There's one hash mark like on the horizontal stadia that's like way out there.
They do go way out there. When
60.
you have on full magnification, I think it goes out to maybe like 10 or 8. I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you back off magnification, then on the horizontal stadia line, that it really reaches out there.
Yeah.
So I think it gets up there.
That's for when your steel target is on wheels.
Perfect.
I personally haven't used it.
I always say perfect example, and really, truly, there is no perfect example unless it's the actual example. But I did employ a moving target lead of 20 miles an hour on doing some coyote hunting this year.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's not just,
You've said that those... Were you using one of the Horus Radicals in that? Oh, well, it would make sense because you just said that you're using the... You've said that those wind up being pretty good predator hunting.
Yeah, I mean, even
Reticles.
and like if you're looking at the way that the some of the manuals are written in the civilian world, like they reference a javelina target, and it's like 10 inches, right? 10 or 12 inches
What
target
is a
height. A javelin would be like a
collared peccary, Jim.
peccary, yeah.
It's like a pig.
It's kind of like a pig.
Pig in Arizona.
Why didn't you just say
Texas.
pig to start with?
What is the difference between them? Like there's a lot different, I guess. I don't want to get into that, but they look like a pig.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
I mean they're in the family.
Yeah. But like coyote, top of back to like bottom of rib cage, you can kind of use that too to kind of the same way you would use like a 10-inch tall target, which measures up, somewhere, something like that. We can actually use that.
You moved your hands, it was like top of shoulders to the top of the head.
Top of the dome, yeah.
All right.
But so you can actually use that reticle to estimate range on, predator targets, game targets, whatever you might want to. And what's cool about it is I always kind of bring it back to application. When speed is necessary, that's something that really helps. And a lot of people be like, well, I don't need that to coyote hunt. And no, you don't need it to coyote hunt. But if I'm out on a range and I don't have a lot of time to range that target, but I just need to make an effective shot to dispatch the animal ethically, that's going to be within that 600-yard range. That's going to be more than enough accuracy, especially a lot of times considering the type of cartridges we're using, hunting varmints, they typically go down pretty easy.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and you may not be using those features on the first shot, but if you're coyote hunting and you call in a double or a triple or you're hunting hogs, yeah, the first shot might be standing, but the next ones aren't going to be.
In order to use that reticle the way that you're explaining using it, do you also then have to keep your turrets on zero? Like you don't want to dial your turrets, do you?
No, you would want to use it on centered up.
So you wouldn't touch the turrets. You would just wind up using the holdovers.
Yep.
Okay, gotcha.
And you can use is it the time of flight dots that you could actually dial out to, and they would still be?
Those are going to be, they're graduated. You look at them, and they're kind of graduated down.
The old Christmas tree style look or whatever. Yeah.
So when you dial on there now, that's going to change that value. But if you do dial on 5 mils then it's like half value or something like that, or you dial on 10 mils now, then that's like quarter value. So, but
interesting.
For me, it'd be just don't dial.
I was going to say,
just leave it. Yeah.
Best practices if you're going to be using that reticle, then
I'm just not good at math, so.
We were out doing some prairie dog hunting last summer en route to the Vortex Extreme. And I got the chance to shoot with some guys that are friends of mine. They're based down in Georgia, and we actually got to go out and shoot. And I saw a Tremor3 utilized, I would say, very closely to what the potential was of what it was designed for, on kind of like a range with those targets that are constantly moving, constantly at unknown distances. And it's not a precise, super precise tool, but it gets rounds where they need to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And so essentially you would just see something pop up or move out or whatever, or expose itself, and then you would bracket it in.
Yeah, I mean, think of a prairie dog sitting up. Right?
Yeah.
It's not all that different from measuring top of a coyote's back to its belly or top of shoulders to the top of the head.
Yeah.
So
a full grown prairie dog is probably about 10 inches,
12
inches,
they're
10
right
to 16
in there.
inches. Yeah.
Yep.
So you just bracket it and then just put it in the corresponding holdover.
So to anyone who thinks that maybe, I would never utilize those features or be able to utilize that, well, if you hunt varmints or you're out shooting a match or unknown target distance range, you can utilize them.
Mm-hmm. So not every reticle, of course, has these holdovers like the Horus ones that we've been talking about, or as far as that's mostly referring to like accounting for ballistic drop, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we talked about the fact that these are almost like a quasi BDC milling reticle because it does have those rapid engagement kind of brackets, and then you can quick reference those. Okay, if it's in the first little bracket, that means that I hold all the way down, or whatever.
Yeah, and kind of how that works in regards to it being a BDC would be more like a 223 with a match bullet and a 308 with a match bullet are going to perform very similarly in terms of drop out to 600 yards, right? A 300 Win Mag and a 6.5 Creedmoor are going to perform very similarly to one another out to certain distances. Once we get past that, things start, one bullet shines over the other. But when we're within that distance, and if we're being honest about the distance that a lot of our shots are taken at, they're very usable.
Yeah.
And you can do the same with many other reticles that we would call like a technical reticle. If you know like the mil value of your target at different distances, you can again kind of use that to bracket and figure out where a lot of those reticles shine is kind of on a second round correction where, if you shoot and you pictured like sometimes the best way to explain it would be if you were looking through a spotting scope and you put like an Excel graph, like a bar graph in the background,
Yeah.
and you bracket out the whole image.
It's like playing Battleship.
Yep, and you take a shot and you see that bullet get pushed off from your from the way that gravity is pulling it straight down, and you see the wind pull it off and to the right. Okay, now I look on that graph when I'm aiming at the target that I was aiming at, or the point of aim where I was aiming, and now I see where that bullet impacted. Now I go to that point in the graph, pull the whole image up to where that impact was, and use that as my correction shot.
It's that simple.
Yeah, I mean, looking at where you're missing, because a lot of times if you can do it fast enough, within a couple of seconds usually. I mean, your wind and all the atmospherics, the external factors of ballistics can you can usually get pretty close.
Right. So the rapid engagement kind of gets you there, close enough at least, and then also the whole grid system allows you the chance to then make any fine tunings later on if need be.
Especially if you don't have like a spotter.
Yeah.
It's going to make that second round correction a lot easier.
Yeah. And that's where, too, like shooting form that we talked about in a couple other podcasts comes into play big time as well. Like you don't want to be the kind of person where you take a shot and immediately like get off your scope or whatever, or flinch big time or something. You gotta stay inside the scope when you shoot, right? That follow through is important to be able to spot kind of your own shot and see what happened in the end.
Yeah, and then like to speak, to the strengths of like an EBR-7C, that reticle, we've had the EBR-2, EBR-2B, 2C. It kind of depends on what scope it's in and some of the different variations within that, right? And then we have like the EBR-7B, which I believe is in the AMGs, and now the EBR-7C, which is kind of our most recent fine-tuned iteration of our, the enhanced battle reticle, right? Mm-hmm. And that reticle, we incorporate some 0.2 hash marks in the scope, which help us to not only give a finer tuned point of aim when dealing with wind, but also kind of having those mover holds for moving targets in a thicker, I guess you would say like a thicker stadia feature, and then having those 0.2s instead of 0.5s, right? Because now I can get over twice as precise by having a 0.2 instead of a 0.5 hash mark.
Yeah.
And speaking in terms of mils, right?
Right.
So,
And that's on the kind of the outer, on the horizontal crosshair, kind of towards the outer edges. Where
it's not down in the dots. This is up. This is up like on the main bars.
MC Ryan's coming through.
Look
in the
at
clutch.
this MC Ryan, big time.
Jeez.
And then I guess to my understanding with that, Reuben,
there you go, YouTube.
Because they're on the outside, right? I mean, you're probably not as making at that point as gross of a correction. Is that kind of why they're a little bit more fine tuned there?
So having these would be the 0.2 hash marks on the upper side, and these would be the 0.5s on the lower side. And like I said,
thicker.
The 0.5s are thicker, which a lot of times with a moving target hold will give us the ability to make a lot of times it's an estimation anyways. So having that point where it's more bold, but then having the connection point be a thinner feature, right? Mm-hmm. It helps us to make that moving target hold even better.
So now that we have a visual representation in front of us as well here, I'm going to ask a couple of questions. So first question I'll ask here. So on the 7C, we have a floating center dot in the very middle. What's the deal with floating center dots, open centers, just closed centers like a regular crosshair? What comes into play there? Why are there so many differences?
That actually is one of the things that has changed several times, right?
Yeah.
In regards to
it's been the responsible thing for Bs and Cs and 2s and 7s.
And with the XLR reticle in our HSLR scope that Mark has had a lot of really good success with, as have a lot of our long range customers. With that, like having that center dot gives us a really, really fine aiming point. Okay, and so rather than having that open center, which we have had in Gen 2 razors, that open center can almost, one thing that's really beneficial is open center at long distance allows us to aim at a smaller target without covering up more of the target with a reticle feature.
Sure.
Right. But having that center dot now when we're establishing a perfect zero, that's where it's really helpful, right? Because we do know that like on the AMGs and on the Gen 2 PSTs and on the Gen 2 Razors, we do have that infinite amount of adjustment. So we can fine tune, right? We don't have 10th mil clicks. You can literally fine tune.
What are you talking about? Yeah, when you're zeroing,
When
you
you're
disengage
zeroing.
the zero stop, and you're adjusting the reticle, but there's no clicks.
So when we're establishing that zero, which everything else is built off of, shooting long range, if we're off by 0.2 at 1,000 yards, that's a significant amount of, in terms of inches, that's a significant amount of miss, right?
Yeah.
And so having that fine center dot allows us to establish the perfect 0 point. It also gives us an aiming point at long range, because if we were thinking about this gap here from the center dot to that first 0.2 hash mark, there isn't a lot that we can use to hold, in terms of there's not enough detail there where we can actually make a measured adjustment at longer range. So having that center dot allows us to know exactly where our zero is for establishing it, and then also if we're shooting a very small target distance or small target but at intermediate distance, we can also be more precise on our shot placement. You look at a lot of like the rimfire competitions. I think some of the, like with the NRL in terms of rimfire, they shoot an aspirin-sized target at 100 yards. That's insanely small. That's probably about the size of that center dot when we actually go and measure it out.
Yeah.
If you have an open center, you won't be able to see it, or you won't be able to aim precisely.
Right,
enough.
you'd be able to see it.
If you have an actual crosshair, like the EBR 7 original one had that fine crosshair in the center. Even so, that was not enough in terms of precision.
It's probably covering up a
lot
thing.
of the target. So having that very fine center dot will allow us to actually establish the best zero and then be precise in shot
You can leave
placement.
that up, Rube. Actually, you don't have to hold it all.
Yeah, lean it up on Mark's laptop there. Let me ask.
We'll see if that works. I don't know.
Let me ask you this: when you look at a reticle and you see the numbers extending out on the horizontal and vertical, now I'm talking in the out to the sides and then up on the upper quadrants or the upper half of the reticle. I mean, these go out. So I guess we're looking at an MRAD reticle right now, right?
This would be a mil reticle. Yep.
Okay. So they go all the way out to like 10 mils, for example. And when you're within 1 to 4 mils on the, I'm talking about, when you're within 1 to 4 mils going out to the sides and then going up too, you have what appear to be 0.25, well, like 0.2,
So
0.5,
0.2 is
whatever.
on the high end.
Yeah.
And then these would be 0.5 increments going up top.
Well, so once you get out to the very, very edges, you just get these super fine little tiny 0.1 mil hash marks. Do you ever use those? What are those marks way out there on the edges used for?
Justin can probably go into a little bit deeper detail, but a 0.1 hash mark would be really effective if we were milling a target at longer range.
Yeah, so that being said, when you mill, you want to be as accurate as possible.
And milling is essentially like ranging with your reticle, right?
Exactly. You're just
Okay.
going to measure it out, apply the math, and you do the calculations, and then you'll get your corresponding hold. And you can do that with the width of a target. Doesn't matter. You can do that with the height of a target, just as long as you know what measurement that is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you would need to know the actual measurement in terms of inches, centimeters, whatever, how big that target was in a nominal value.
Right,
And then
'cause
we'll
there's-
come back and use an
So
angle.
gotcha.
3 things you need
These
to
are
know.
all 0.1s up here as well then?
Yep.
There's 3 things you need to know in shooting. It's the size of the target, the angle at which you're essentially aiming your barrel at to arc it there, and then the distance from you to the target, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's kind of like triangulation. If you know, like...
You need
what
to know
we're-
2 of 3.
Yeah, what you're getting
Yeah.
at with milling
yeah.
a target is I know the size of the target, and I know the angle at which that target takes up by milling it, and by putting it between
yeah.
2 different hash marks. And then by that, I'm going to get the third thing, which is the distance.
Yep. You need to know 2 of 3.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you can use that if you know the distance to a target and you know how much it measured in your reticle by using these features, then you can actually do that backwards and determine the size of the target.
Yeah.
Right? So a lot of times, and I had asked this question to Paul Neese down in our training department. Paul, or in our customer engagement department, I'm sorry. Mark, you might know, like in Alaska, you need to be pretty careful when you're measuring the size of a bull, right? You're
Oh, man.
estimating a bull elk, right? Or a bull moose, sorry. And so a lot of times, whether if you're in an area where you have to shoot a 60-inch bull, you could range find to that target, and then you could measure it with the reticle and see how it measured up, and you could actually convert that back to an inch value. Now, it's tough because a lot of the times those guys don't hold still for you.
Well, yeah, they don't
But
always.
honestly, you can get a really close, and
I tell you what, though, if you got a question mark in that situation, you're either just not shooting.
Right.
So you're either taking the time to do, and I never even thought about doing that kind of calculation to figure out, because like you said, in a lot of areas in Alaska, there's a 50-inch minimum for moose. And I guess case in point, I'll bring up an anecdote, but I was fortunate enough to go moose hunting with some buddies this last fall. We were actually in an any bull unit, so you could shoot any bull. But one thing that became very obvious to me being out there and getting to look at a handful of moose was the fact that being able to tell, like a 45-inch moose from a 50-inch moose, or even from 45 to 50, very difficult in the field. I mean, I'm going off me and my limited experience up there, but unless you're just pro at judging those things, unless it's a true giant, you're probably better laying off instead of getting in trouble, right?
Yeah.
But
Because they're all huge.
My buddy killed a bull that was like 40, low 40s, and at first glance, I was like, that's a 50-inch bull. And that was 10 inches, essentially 10 inches off. So anyway,
so you
really good point that I never thought about.
In theory, you could use something like that, but you need to know 2 of the 3, right, to calculate that. The other thing that's cool is if we're on an unknown target distance range or unknown distance target range, we're shooting targets that we may know the size of them, but we may not know the size of them. So if you go out and let's just say you're able to use a rangefinder, range the target, go back, measure the target in mils or MOA, and then come up with an inch value, we can actually look at and now know the size of the target. And if we know the limitations of our gear, maybe our ammunition, how accurate it is, our rifle, how accurate it is, we can choose to make the attempt to hit that target or not. Because what I'm getting at is if we were at a distance that we know the distance, and let's just say I asked Mark, hey, do you think you could hit a 6-inch target at 800 yards? If you were like, well, I'm not sure. Okay, now we can go back and decide if we should take that shot. Whether it be actually real world application or it be something where we're just out on the range trying to figure out the limitations of our gear.
And one thing nice about this particular reticle with those 0.1 increments, starting at that 4 mil line, if you have 0.1s, now you have 0.05 because you can just, obviously take the center of that and, divide it in half, which is nice, especially when you're, accuracy. And,
Right.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excuse me, not, yeah.
So in the lower 2 quadrants now, I know we've mentioned these a number of times. Quadrants.
Now, if you're only listening right now, you should probably tune in because we're looking. You should probably click on the YouTube video because we're using a visual aid.
Exactly, we're using a visual aid right now. We're looking at a giant cutout of an EBR 7C. We'll continue to do our best to lay it out for you listeners out there and paint the audio visual picture. So now we're talking about the lower 2 quadrants, the lower half of the reticle. We've discussed these windage dots, these Christmas tree dots, these time of flight dots a couple of times now. And that's kind of a characteristic that you see a lot of times in first focal plane long range reticles. You've seen it in our XLR, you've seen it in our EBR 27, CBA, whatever. You see it in the Horus ones where they call it, that grid system. Now, I think a lot of people see those and they just think, wind dots, right? So, somehow they correspond to wind, which I'm sure they can or do. Is that it? Is that what are you using all those things for? What's the main thing? What kind of?
I may revert back to the Horus Radicals because I have a lot more experience using those
Yeah,
than
go
say
for it.
the EBR 7. However, with those reticles versus, like I said, not very familiar with the EBR7 yet, but with the Tremor3, it has those, if you look below the horizontal stadia line, it has those dots, and they kind of go out. It also has hash marks on there. So those dots, you can actually true them so you can find out what value in miles per hour they represent.
In miles per hour for like wind miles per hour?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Yes. So depending on the caliber and muzzle velocity and things like that, you can now take those dots and assign them a corresponding mile per hour value in wind. So there's a process, to do that, and then you can, use whatever ballistic software you have to, input all that, and then you'll get the value that way. So, which is pretty handy because now you're like, okay, well, it's a 5 mile an hour wind. I just have to put that dot on that target.
The 5 mile an
and
hour
the
dot.
other and the other option would be using a Kestrel as some sort of wind gathering device, right? We could go back and measure the wind, then go input that into our ballistic calculator, and we would get a mil hold for different wind values, right? If you were, and what I'm getting at is that you would have to know, okay, I'm at 680 yards, my wind value is this many mils. Okay, at 880 yards, it's a different wind value. The beauty of those wind dots or time of flight dots is that once you determine what your drop is for the different distances, those wind dots don't change in terms of like how far the target is. And they're graduated out, right? So they're increasing in value. So if it's this many, if it's 4 mile per hour wind, it doesn't matter what distance it's at. That's a 4 mile, and then 4, 8, 12, 16, it goes all the way out to the edges. So you don't have to then go and get a mil value wind and hold on that mil like feature or MOA feature. This is basically where this looks most like a BDC is that once you've trued those, it turns it into a mile per hour.
Oh, whereas, okay, when you're looking at something like an EBR7C, which again we have here as a visual aid, those aren't that way. Those correspond to a mil value.
Mil value, yep.
So those don't correspond to a mile per hour value of wind.
Mm-mm.
How do you use these then?
You would, like I said,
you would do the reverse.
You range your target.
Yeah.
You enter in your mile per hour wind, however fast the wind is blowing.
Oh, and then it's going to give you
a mil value, and you would go onto this grid, and right here is your 1, 2, 3 mil hold, or so this is 2, 1. This would be your 4 mil down, but then this is like 3 mils of wind. This would be 1, 2, 3, 4 mils of wind.
Gotcha. And that just kind of adds in one more step to it.
It's just another step.
A little bit less rapid again, right?
You're taking a step out whenever you have a BDC, right? Because you're kind of assuming that value is going to be close to what you need.
Yeah. Yeah. BDC or like a WDC or like a something.
It's it's actually really cool when you get behind it. And it's one of those things I always hate to say, like, you just got to try it because a lot of people aren't going to be able to just try it, right? But when you get behind a system that has certain functionality built into it for a certain weapons platform and a certain application, oftentimes it becomes very apparent why something was designed the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
It's all just taking a step out. Steps take time.
Right. When you look at these, and once, like you said, once you actually start using them, they get a little bit less intimidating. But when you first start looking at it, it's easy to just get lost in those things.
Oh, totally.
And you can obviously still dial them and just shoot off the center reticle.
Yep.
So like, of all the people out there who need precision rifle scopes, like let's say somebody's looking to get a new rifle scope and they're going to be shooting long range. A lot of people out there say, and I know I dog on the forums all the time, so I'm going to dog again. You head to the forums and it's like, hey, I need a long range rifle scope. And people are like, oh, FFP or die.
Yeah.
And, and it's like, you got to get the one with the Horus or the Christmas tree or whatever. You need it.
Mm-hmm.
Does everybody actually need it? You're like,
if you need it, you need it.
I feel like I'm teeing it up for like the answer that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But like at the same time, I feel like it is the correct answer. It's like, I think a lot of people get a reticle like this, and I'm not trying to bash them or anything, because like, I mean, if you get a Gen 2 Razor, you're gonna get a reticle like that.
Yeah.
That's just the way it comes.
Yep.
And you might want a Gen 2 Razor because it's phenomenal optically and it has great turrets, great zero stop, all that other stuff. But like, that's not like the do or die, right?
No,
Is what I'm getting at.
I guess I'll say it like this, and Justin, you can cut in here anytime. If you need it, you need it.
Yeah.
And you'll find out that if you buy what everyone is suggesting for, if someone doesn't get info about your particular activity and they just say you need this, they're generalizing. They're not giving you a specific. Good example, like I have 2 Gen 2 Razor 4.5 to 27s that are EBR1. Okay, just a crosshair with some vertical and horizontal.
They're first
hash
focal
marks.
plane still though, right?
First focal plane, yeah.
I
I don't have all of this.
Yeah.
All right, it's just this and this, and those are 2 of my favorite reticles to shoot. Because if we get back to that point within my preparation, getting ready for a shoot or getting ready to go to the range for a day, if I've got a chronograph and I know a lot of the information, all the external factors like wind, humidity, density, altitude, barometric pressure, all that stuff, and I'm dialing for my shots, this is all irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
If I know my elevation drop, this is irrelevant.
Yeah.
Everything above and below is irrelevant. If I have a rangefinder that can accurately range my target, and I know that my elevation data is good, I'm working on this horizontal thing here, right?
Yeah.
So telling somebody you need all this is like, yeah, well, if you don't know what your gun is doing, then yeah, you better have a grid there so you can see where in these 4 pie slices you're impacting and correct for it. But I still have those 2 scopes, even though we've got 7Cs and 2Cs and H59s and Tremor3s, those are still mounted up on 2 of my rifles that I shoot very often.
Yeah. Well, in the same breath, and like what Jim was saying, some of these scopes, they just come with it. And just because you may not use a particular feature or reticle feature also doesn't mean that's still not the right scope for you with the other host of features that it comes with. We talk about the XLR that I've used quite a bit, right? But in every situation I've used it, I dial my elevation, right? So I don't use the windage tree. I'm not using these holds. I've used the horizontal cross or the horizontal hash references if I've got somebody calling wind for me. And again, you talk about, well, do or don't you need first focal plane? That's a situation where it's nice to have first focal plane if you got somebody calling good wind for you.
And I don't want to play a disadvantage to the people who are just listening. But if you're listening, what I'm doing is I'm just utilizing the image of the reticle here. But if I'm out on the range and I have time to range the target, go to my Kestrel or my cell phone and pull up my app and look at my drop, due to gravity, out at longer distances, I'm utilizing most of the information on that horizontal stadia, right? Like, I'm not necessarily worried too much about stuff above it or below it.
Right.
And I can dial. Now, what happens when what happens when time now is a factor?
That's the big thing I was going to say.
When time becomes a factor, same with first and second focal plane,
Yes.
time oftentimes is the limiting factor where it's like, okay, you don't have time, if we're playing like, what if, okay, what if you do this and you have to shoot this target, but you only have 10 seconds to do it now instead of 30.
Yeah.
Look at a sport like F-class, where they're oftentimes, and Ian, I apologize, but oftentimes these guys are given 20 minutes to shoot an array of targets.
Yeah. And
now,
their target has all the ballistics information on it.
The target has the ballistics, so you're using a very simple type of reticle.
Yeah.
And I understand like a lot of the factors that go into what they're dealing with now. They might wait for the clouds to go in front of the sun. They might wait 10 minutes before they fire a shot in hopes that the wind dies down.
An incredibly technical sport. Right?
It is so far above my head in terms of how technical it is. Because they're shooting at extreme distances with A lot of times, like if you're shooting FTR, like Ian has won a couple of championships in, FTR is like a 308, right? So
a period cartridge, ballistically inferior.
Yeah, one day they'll find
Jim.
out about the 6.5 Creedmoor.
Well, if you'd like to defend Chevy or the 308, comment below.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark will give you my address too.
Mark's the only person here that shoots Wisdom. Anyways, right. So now that time
Winchester
is
shoulder masher.
so if that time is now a factor, now let's just say we don't have time to dial, and now we need horizontal values for wind.
Yeah.
If we're needing to hold for that value. So same with second focal plane, kind of like we were talking earlier. If I'm going to go out to the range and nobody's telling me how fast I have to go and that animal isn't moving away from me and getting away and, like I'm out on the range just trying to shoot bullseyes, a lot of those guys do actually like a second focal plane scope because that reticle can appear more fine.
Yeah.
So if you need it, you need it. But if you don't, you don't.
Well, and I'd imagine, too, like if you're in a scenario like in a spotter-shooter scenario where you are communicating and whoever's behind the gun is making, like you said, time is of the essence, and you're making, rapid corrections, engaging potentially multiple targets, to be able to stay in the optic the entire time, not look up, not dial, is just going to aid in that speed quite a bit as well.
I feel like I've had a revelation, if that's the right word.
No, I'm right there with you, Jim. I know what you're saying.
I feel like now discussing this, and when Reuben, you started getting into kind of some of these differences, and like a person that might need a more technical reticle versus somebody who might not, or first focal plane versus somebody who might just need second focal plane or whatever. A lot of the advancements in rifle scope, especially like when it comes down to the reticle designs, technologies, and stuff, a lot of it boils down to time. And saving time in the field when you're shooting. I mean, look at the old like duplex reticles. It was like, hey, that's great. You got a crosshair. Boom, we can use that. But then somebody was like, I wish I had, when something comes out kind of quick and I don't have time to dial, I wish I just had like another little hash mark down there that corresponded to like, 200 yards. And then, that was kind of like the BDC. And then somebody was like, well, and if I had a couple of windage lines, I could just kind of reference those real fast and just kind of, and then you had windage lines. And then you had the old MilDot system, which a lot of people think is like a ballistic drop system, but that was designed to actually range targets. And, somebody thought, I'm sure, like, well, I've acquired a target inside my rifle scope. I don't know how far it is, but as soon as I, like get off the scope and get a rangefinder or do something to range the target, I get back in the scope.
Gone.
Gee dang it. And then things just keep evolving, and you kind of look at those Horus Radicals and stuff like this, like the EBR-7C and whatnot. And as far as like, physical glass etched reticles and things like that, I mean, they've taken in like every single advancement that's happened in reticle history to like make this ultimate rapid kind of just like user interface. It's pretty crazy.
No, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And like I said, it almost takes the, spotter out of the equation. So.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, and when we talk about spotters too, I mean, a lot of times we see guys at the Vortex Extreme. I've paid pretty close attention to the teams that, will win that, right? And even watching other sniper championships like Mammoth or the International Sniper Competition. Anytime those guys are in a two-man team, like Justin, correct me if I'm wrong, but like they're running the same reticle as their partner is.
It's imperative that yeah. Otherwise, you're going to be on not even in the same page.
Yeah.
So
it's like speaking. To
like zero. Yeah. You'd be zero help.
Yeah.
Be like, yeah.
But
and if you have, let's just say you have two guys laying down next to each other in the field, like one guy here, and they're both aiming at the same target. And if they were doing something where like they dialed their elevation and guy one shoots. Now guy two is aiming at the target and watches on his reticle where guy one's impact is. Mm-hmm. Now he goes, okay, I just go up to that point because I know where he was aiming. So what you're saying is, if you're shooting the same firearm with the same dope.
General stuff in the same dope, yeah. So you would almost literally just like, you're watching his shot, but you're immediately preparing for your shot by just keeping your crosshairs on the target where you want to hit the target, and then just waiting to see if maybe he hits the target, right?
Yep.
But otherwise, maybe he misses, and you just see that splash.
And those two guys are communicating the whole time, like, hey, what's your hold? Okay, I'm holding 1 mil for wind. All right, cool. Boom, impact. And I watched it last year at the Vortex Extreme with, like, Dylan and Garrett winning the AR division, right? Those guys ran the same reticle on their rifles, and they ran the same rifles. Their dope was really close. Their rifles were within 20 feet per second of each other, shooting the same ammo, etc. And watching those guys work as a team was cool because Dylan would go up and be like, all right, I'm going to hold 1 mil left. Boom, and it was impact, and then Garrett just held the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, so... that was really cool, you know, and then like guy 1 misses, guy 2 looks and goes, okay, you were 1/2 mil off the right edge. All right, now guy 2 corrects for that, and then hypothetically, if you had that situation and they were shooting each target, let's just say twice, like we did at the Vortex Extreme last year, you know, each team is going to engage every target 4 times collectively, right? As the team, right? 4 engagements. Hypothetically, if they're doing it quickly and efficiently, if shot 1 was a miss and shot 2 was spotted, or shooter 2 spotted that miss, shot 2, 3, and 4 should be impacts.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, you're talking about speed. Like, that's communication between 2 guys, and the second guy is gaining a lot of speed off the data from the first guy.
Yep.
Eric and I were out there with the same gun, same scope, same ammo, same everything, but I did not have the mental fortitude to to do what Reuben was talking about. It's difficult, actually. I mean, maybe it's just like I wasn't thinking about it because I was in the moment or whatever.
Well, it's because you're dehydrated and
you're dehydrated. You just climbed a mountain, and but I'm not the only person who's ever been dehydrated. Just climbed a mountain and has to make a shot. But it is something that it takes a little extra mental kind of like discipline to think of that.
Mental fortitude.
Yeah, like, okay, my partner's going to shoot. First off, like when my partner shoots, I got to be prepared for it so I don't blink, and then miss, which, luckily Eric wasn't running some
suppressors
break. Yeah, cough, cough, exactly. Good point.
Check out episode 76. What?
Yeah. But you alluded to the spotter thing. Are most guys, like, in your professional career, most guys, when they're spotting, are they both looking through a rifle scope, or are they utilizing like rifle scope spotter with a reticle in it that's similar, at least MRAD, or?
It can all vary. In my experience, everybody's been shooting, that the guys I've been working with, it's all mils, and everything's more or less kind of standardized that way. Yes, you might have like a different reticle in, say, the spotting scope, but it's still in mils, so you can still, communicate. But mission will kind of dictate maybe, hey, we're not going to carry, a spotting scope. It's just too much weight, or it doesn't really call for that. So you might have, maybe 2 guys on glass through a rifle scope. Or maybe you only have that one guy and the other guy's maybe pulling security for him.
Gotcha.
So I kind of hate to say, it kind of all depends, but it kind of,
most things do. We've heard it depends on this podcast a time or two.
So, but like that being said, again, whether it's, 2 guys on glass, which can be preferable. I mean, especially if you don't want to carry that extra weight, have the time to set it up and things like that, or maybe the position doesn't dictate you're able to get on a spotting scope. Or, you instead of taking a tripod in the spotting scope, maybe you're going to take, extra ammo, or maybe some different, communication stuff or things like that. So, again, in my experience, there's been certain instances where we only have the engagement team might only be one person with another guy, I guess, on security.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's really not focused on what's going on here. He's kind of focused on what's going on back there. So instead of having a spotter and, a shooter, now you're just down to a shooter.
And that guy's then kind of got to be his own spotter then.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And which a lot of that information in the reticle can really help you if you're
I'm sure. Yeah.
Applying proper fundamentals to your position and everything, where you should be able to get back on target quickly enough to see that impact or miss. Now you can know what you're doing and apply it without having someone tell you that.
Yeah. I'm so back and forth on it, man. It's like I don't know. like I've shot Vortex Extremes and gone hunting and stuff like that with different reticles. It's kind of tough to figure out like which one.
I think you're back and
like
forth because it is situational.
It
so
is
it's like,
situational,
so if I'm doing this, then I want this. If I'm doing this,
everybody always looks for like the end all be all, right? So like the reticle is like, oh, if I get this reticle, I'll do everything. And it's like you can't really do that, Yeah. It's kind of. I mean, you can get a reticle. You can do anything with really any reticle.
Yeah.
It's just.
It'd be like saying I want one gun to do everything.
Right. Like.
I mean, yeah, 300 short mag, but outside of that. God, you guys,
man.
I'm getting tired of it. I do have a question.
Yes.
About the horse, and I think Reuben, maybe you kind of touched on this, and so, or maybe you touched on it completely, and it went over my head. But so the horse, it seems like just a super robust BDC, right? In a way.
Kind of, yeah.
Kind of.
In a way.
Does it work best, or is it optimized for like a certain cartridge or a ballistics curve then? And I know you were talking about 308s and 300s and 6.5s and stuff like that. I mean, is
30
that
caliber? Yeah.
okay?
I want to say
okay.
is what he was best designed around was that. So
okay,
like that's 308 you could say, but yeah, so best designed around that caliber.
Gotcha. But then,
but he can be utilized, for anything really.
Okay.
But I believe it was designed specifically around that.
And the beauty of it is that you can go back and true it, right? Like if you had an AR-10 or whatever in 308 and you were shooting 168s or 175s, there's going to be very little that you need to change about the reticle.
Okay,
if you're shooting a 6 Creedmoor with it, you're going to want to go in and true everything up and make sure that, and in that case,
when you say change the reticle, you can't go.
You can't physically change it,
but you're just changing what corresponds to what.
Yep, and so like it gets into the weeds a little bit. Justin would probably know it a lot better than I do, but if you were looking at like, let's just say you determined that the wind value was 5 miles an hour for a 308 with a common bullet weight that you would shoot, like 168, 175, whatever, and now you, go to like a 6 Creedmoor. And now your wind value might be, it might be a 4 mile an hour with a 308, but now it's a 5 mile an hour wind with a 6 Creedmoor, something like that, right? Those numbers are just thrown out there. But as you change the cartridges, go to a more efficient cartridge or a less efficient cartridge, those time of flight dots are going to change. Obviously, it's a time of flight dot. It's not that's why it's not called a wind dot. It's because it's not a constant thing. It's going to change depending upon what cartridge you use it for. So it's based on the bullet's time of flight at that distance. And so, yeah, it does work really well with that, like I said, 308, something like that, where you mount it up. And because of like a 223's ballistic curve being very similar to that, and again, average ballistic curve out to that distance, like 600 to 800 yards, it actually works out really well. It's very little that you need to change. Now you go to something that's pushing like a 300 Win Mag pushes in many instances the same bullet that you would push with a 308. It just does it a lot faster. Mm-hmm. So now some of those things are going to change a little bit. That rapid engagement technique using the value or the features above the horizontal stadia, you might if you were using a ranging function of that and then going to a quick mill hold, your mill hold will be different because the 300 Win Mag would be more efficient than a 308.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so it is designed around a lot of those cartridges that we know and love that are very common. So that's kind of where we're getting at with that.
Cool.
And I will say this too. I mean, like you guys kind of ask, about like a be all end all reticle, and like, no, it's really not. None of them are be all end all. Like the dead hold BDC is not a be all end all. Because if you're going to go shoot a PRS match, then in that sport, the EBR2C is actually the top reticle, mm-hmm. which will probably transition to like an EBR7C. But the most desirable in that sport, unless these guys are using PRS as a way to practice and stay sharp for their professional career, in which maybe they're required to use like a H59 or a Tremor3, mm-hmm. the most efficient tool for that job would be like an EBR7 or an EBR2.
Because you're trying to be more precise while still being fast, or
yeah. So speed and accuracy, or speed and precision, are very important.
Yeah.
A lot of times, guys aren't. There might be a stage at a 10-stage PRS match. There might be one stage where you have to mill your targets. Most of them, they're going to let you get out your Fury 5000s and range targets and put them on a range card before you actually go on the clock.
I see. So that rapid engagement, unknown distance target thing isn't as much of an issue. So you don't need to get the...
And it's clutter. So it also fills up all of these quadrants that you might need to use to see the target more clearly.
Okay. So it would be in that particular case unnecessary clutter.
Yeah.
Whereas in another case, it's okay, no, I need that there.
Yeah. Absolutely. And those time of flight dots are actually very large. So if you're looking at it, and if you're looking on our website or whatever, you can pull up an image of the reticle. Those time of flight dots are very large, and they're designed for the size target that that scope was designed to be engaging with.
Right.
So,
and that being said, when he's talking about like a larger, dot, it's going to be a little bit harder to pick up your impact. So to make that correction, I mean, you could be obscured by those wind dots. So you can't even, you may shoot and be like, all right, where did I actually hit? When in actuality, you might be obscured by one of those dots.
Oh, interesting. Gotcha.
if you were using that dot as a gross aiming point and your impact was still within the size of the dot, but if the target was smaller than the size of the dot, then you weren't able to see that miss. That's where it's problematic.
That's interesting. That's almost like a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
It is.
And that actually only occurs if your target is too small, right? But if you're shooting, again, to go back to the size target that reticle was intended to be used for, then that's never an issue.
Noted. How about that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Noted.
Much like a lot of things within shooting optics, if something was designed for a certain application, that's you don't fault the guy who designed it when it doesn't work for a different application that's completely irrelevant or completely different.
Yep. No, that's true.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of a car reference. That's kind of why I was sitting there with a blank stare for a while. I kind of thought of one, but it'd be like, there's no end-all be-all enthusiast car, as much as everybody will disagree with me, because everybody has their own favorite enthusiast car. Somebody might be like Plymouth Hemi-Cuda, and then another guy who goes to the racetrack and likes curves and, like braking and stuff. Not E-A-K-I-N-G, but like slowing down. Would be like, no, probably something that isn't designed for the drag strip. But yeah, so there's different cars for everything. Sorry, that was a stretch.
Mark,
Not
when
really,
are you getting an AR? When are you getting an AR?
Pardon?
You heard me.
When's that going to happen?
Soon.
All right.
Did you get your gas tube that you said you needed 3 months ago yet?
Yeah, it's coming. It's Amazon.
Last calls on that note?
Last calls.
That was your last call. You already used it.
No, I want a different one.
Fine. You can have a different
Can
one.
I go?
Yeah.
We got to tell Justin about last calls.
Justin, we're going to bring it in for a landing, and you're going to go last, just so you know. And so Justin was nervous before he went on this. It's not that scary, is it?
Well,
it's just
not
us
when
four
you think,
talking in an empty room.
When you just
Besides
consider
MC
like,
Ryan.
hey, these four guys, here, 5.
MC Ryan's over there.
But at the same time, you kind of got, I'm not a big crowd guy.
Well,
He's not a talker.
No.
But you know what? You are a talker. And I think it probably didn't take long for you to get comfortable and go, well, I realize I'm the smartest guy in the room, so I kind of got a leg up on this.
Great
crew.
last
but I
call,
could
Mark.
see how
Anyways.
that would be. I could see how that would be intimidating because it's like, geez, I gotta, kind of carry the baton here for all these three morons.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway. Mark, okay, here.
All right,
let's
here's my
spit out a real one.
Here's my last call, and part of this comes from when Reuben was kind of running through the Horus Radicals with me, and then this conversation as well. I remember the first time I saw that thing, I was like, and I mean, like even this reticle was like, there's a lot going on here. When I saw that thing, I was like, you got to be kidding me. But with some explanation, it makes sense. It's extremely practical, and I'm not going to compare it to a minivan, even though minivans are extremely practical.
Oh my gosh, please don't.
Because that would just ruin it.
Okay.
But
At least you know that.
so it's not the minivan of reticles, but they're cool. And God, Jim, you're just cringing. You hate every second of this.
sorry.
You hate minivans.
Yes.
Anyway, super practical, super fast, purpose built. I really want to run one a little bit more as it's intended.
Mm-hmm. It's the Subaru Baja Turbo of reticles.
That's a better.
It's not for everyone. It's a sedan and a truck mixed together, and it's fast. So it's everything that you would ever want.
Yeah.
But some people won't like it just because they don't like the way it looks.
What you said.
That's my last call. I feel good. Now I got a proper car reference.
You need it. Are you?
I needed that.
I was waiting for it. I was planning on a little bit of time. Yeah. Stuff within shooting and within everything in life is you have to look at application, look at your needs. Ultimately, you need to determine that there is no be-all, end-all for anything, unless, of course, we're talking 300 WISM, which I think Mark is going to stand by that one, so I'm just going to assume that you're sticking with that.
I'm surprised that you've caved on that.
Some people can test that. You'd be surprised.
But yeah, look at, know what you want to do or what you want to accomplish before going out and, spending a bunch of money on stuff that you might end up not needing, or buying something that that wasn't the right product for that application. Now you have to go rebuy that product. Whether we be talking about shooting 3-gun or hunting or shooting competitively, or to all the men and women use our product in uniform, or any type of product out there. You oftentimes need to know what you're going to be doing with it, right, before you go and buy it. And so I think ultimately the stuff we've talked about today, if you know what you're doing and have determined that you're going to need that information in a reticle, then you'll be really happy when you hit the range with it, because it's going to make your life real easy.
Good one. I like that.
Yeah. I'm going to stick with that one.
It's really good.
You made it seem like you didn't have anything, and then you did.
Yeah.
Sandbagging.
Did I just insult you somehow?
Heck of a thing.
Okay.
No, you're good.
You looked sad for a second.
I was actually
Justin,
impressed with myself.
what do you got to bring us home?
Pretty much been said. But no, everything has like its pros and cons, and I hate to say like cons because I don't mean in a negative, way or anything, but it's exactly what it is. You just got to find out what the pros and cons are and what you need to utilize it for. So everything has its certain applications. That's why there's, how many different reticles on the market today. So
Many.
Exactly.
Many
Hopefully
reticles.
this kind of cleared it up for some of those out there.
Hopefully so. Well, for those listening, if we haven't helped you, if we just confused you more, feel free to hit us up with questions. You can always call us, email us, hit us up on social media. Happy to discuss further these different reticles with you. Or if you have any suggestions for other future podcasts on reticles and things like that, we're happy to do that too. Otherwise, thanks for listening.
And if you find yourself in South Central Wisconsin and you would like to have this stuff explained to you in person, we're more than happy to do it.
We've got the old projector slide things to put over the paper for
The transparencies.
The transparencies.
They help.
We'll be fully transparent with you.
My new last call. Transparencies aren't dead.
Well said, sir. Everybody, happy hunting and shooting out there. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
All right, that'll wrap it up for this episode of the Vortex Nation podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hit that subscribe button so you can always stay up to date on the latest happenings over here at the Vortex Nation podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram at Vortex Nation Podcast. Again, everybody, thanks, and happy hunting and shooting. We appreciate it. Have a good one.